From the Digital Media Center, on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the Southern Oregon Television Award for Program of the Year and the award for Best Educational Program. I'm the host and producer, John Letts. Ramping Up Your English is an educational support program for intermediate English learners. It's a program for people from all language backgrounds. Ramping Up Your English is also for people of all ages. If you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English and want to reach higher levels of proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our current thematic unit is Animals. This is segment 1 of episode 53. In recent episodes, we've been doing a lot of work on animal habitats and biomes. This map from National Geographic shows areas of the United States that have been studied and analyzed for the frequency in which various habitats occur. Now, you'll remember that habitats are where any given animal meets its needs for food, water, shelter, and space. The areas of red are habitats that only occur in that location. Habitats in orange areas occur more than once, but there are very few of them. These habitats are rare. At the other end of the spectrum, the dark green represents areas that occur frequently in the United States. In other words, they are common. So you can see from the map, infrequent and unique habitats are found along all three coasts, Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and the Gulf of Mexico. Several areas of the West and along the Appalachian Mountains also contain some unique or rare habitats. Without an animal's habitat, the animal cannot survive. The National Geographic collected and presented this information so that communities can make informed decisions about how they manage and protect these critical areas. Now, one area of critical concern in the Pacific Northwest is the exact location of this TV station, right here in Southern Oregon. Much of it is likely to be protected in the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument, set aside for careful study and management and recently expanded by President Obama. The area is in peril as the Trump administration reconsiders this protection. So as this program is being produced, the Secretary of Interior visited Southern Oregon as part of this reconsideration. Over 200,000 Oregonians gave comments of support for continuing the monument status, and local residents made sure the Secretary knows how much this community supports the monument as it was expanded by President Obama. Now, we're told to expect a recommendation to President Trump somewhere in mid-August of 2017. So habitat isn't just an academic matter. As National Geographic states on that map, the greatest threat to diversity of life on Earth is loss of habitat. I hope you've located information about the animal you've chosen to research and on which you're writing a report. Previous episodes demonstrate how to find and communicate facts about an animal's physical description, its distribution or range, and its habitat. Today we explore another research topic, your animal's classification. Now, part of the work is already done for you. All the living things are classified in a systematic way called a taxonomy by people. The living things belong to 5 kingdoms: animals, plants, Monera, which are tiny things like bacteria needing a microscope, and protists, even smaller things needing a very strong microscope. And let's not forget the kingdom of the fungus, because the fungus is among us. Now, since you've chosen an animal to research, you already know that it's in the kingdom of animals. Now, at the next level, animals are grouped according to certain traits they have, and this determines the animal's class. The first grouping has to do with bones. Specifically, does the animal have a backbone? If it does, it's called a vertebrate. If there's no backbone, the animal is called an invertebrate. Now this is called a vertebrae. This here, okay? This is called a vertebrae. And let me tell you about it. Inside is a spinal column that carries the nerves to and from the brain and other parts of the body. Now you have one of these too. Reach to your back or your spine and see how rough it is. All those bumps, those are the bones like this one. The backbone forms part of the interior bones we call the skeleton. It gives form and shape to the body. Now let's look at the vertebrates. These include mammals, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and birds. So these animals are also grouped by having a list of traits. Now let's go on to fish. With few exceptions, fish are cold-blooded. They are covered with scales and they lay eggs to reproduce. However, fish don't have lungs. They get the oxygen they need from the water in which they live by using gills. Fish have backbones, by the way. Now let's look at reptiles. They also have backbones and they lay eggs to reproduce. Reptiles are cold-blooded and their bodies are covered with scales. In these ways, reptiles have a lot in common with fish, but here's how they differ. Reptiles must get their oxygen from the air, so they have lungs that help them do that. Now, some reptiles spend much of their time in water, but they have to come up at times for a breath. Amphibians are so close to reptiles that they're often studied at the same time in school. But they're in a distinct class in that their life cycles are distinct and difference that they lack the scales that reptiles have. Now let's take a look at birds. Birds have little in common with reptiles and amphibians. Birds produce heat in their bodies and self-regulate their body temperatures. The term for that is warm-blooded. They breathe with lungs and they have backbones. They're covered with feathers rather than scales, but they do lay eggs like reptiles do. Now, mammals are warm-blooded just like birds, but they differ in very important ways. Mammals give milk to their young. No other classification of animal does both of those things. Mammals also have hair or fur. They breathe with lungs. They give live birth. And of course, they have backbones. Now, classification, that's those classifications of animals that have backbones. What about those that don't have backbones? Well, there are lots of those. This poster shows just a few. The one thing this diverse group has in common is the lack of a backbone. With bones giving animals their shape, how do these animals hold their shape? Well, most of them don't. Some of them can change their shape. Some hold their shape by having a hard shell on the exterior of their body, what we call an exoskeleton. Now, familiar to many people, insects are invertebrates. They have that exoskeleton. Insects have 6 legs and they lay eggs to reproduce. They go through life stages, some of them undergoing dramatic changes called metamorphosis. So with this information, you can tell which classification your animal fits in. If you're stumped, I'll show you at least one way to tell. But first, let's watch a video about mammals as we end segment 1 of episode 53.
When you think of animals, these creatures may be the ones that come to mind. These are mammals, neither the earliest nor the most numerous of the animal world. There's a level of kinship even with this black-tailed deer, the body producing its own heat and the mother giving milk to her young. People have these things in common with mammals. This doe, a female deer, browses among the rocks and trees at Crater Lake National Park. Besides domesticated animals, deer may be the most recognizable mammal to many people. In the deer family, elk may not be as well known. Much larger and heavier than black-tailed deer, elk live in large herds. This bull elk has a rack of antlers, as do deer bucks. The male elk keeps a harem of cows, elk cows that is. Bear cubs explore a rocky beach in Alaska. There's likely to be a sow close by, the cub's protective mother. This is a bear of a different species, a grizzly bear, venturing to water's edge to catch migrating salmon. The timing's all off, though. The salmon run hasn't started yet, so the lumbering bear pulls up pieces of the beach looking for anything it can eat. Grizzly bears are much larger than black bears. Up in Alaska, they're simply called brown bears. Grizzly bears are even more protective of their young than black bears, and their larger size makes them even more dangerous, that is, to people who invade their familiar space. Grizzly bears don't typically seek out people to attack. They stay busy minding their own business, trying to survive and raise their young. Before the salmon run, it's a struggle to survive in this vast, unforgiving land in Alaska, even for the grizzly bear. If you want to see mountain goats, you have to look up into the mountains. Their ability to move in this rocky terrain helps them avoid predators. These mountain goats are in Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska. Alaska is also home to these forest caribou. They're found in small groups, unlike the great caribou herds that migrate in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. These are enjoying the scant remains of snow in Denali National Park. This bit of snow gives them some relief from the biting insects that swarm the area in the summer. These forest caribou are as much a part of this landscape as the vegetation, that vegetation kept short by the killing cold air of winter. Both male and female grow antlers. While the caribou are shy, this ground squirrel doesn't seem the least bit bothered by people. Black bears also try to avoid people. They also avoid the savage winter by hibernating in a den. Squirrels disappear during the winter. During those winter months, having stored the seeds and nuts and reducing their body's metabolism, they're able to survive the cold months. This squirrel lives near the Rogue River in southern Oregon. It's holding perfectly still to avoid detection. Like black bears, squirrels have sharp, curved claws for climbing up trees. In the squirrel's case, they also have claws for moving down the trees as well. And those bushy tails? Squirrels can wrap those around their bodies to keep them warm in winter. This is a ram, a male sheep. Now, these wild sheep live along the Snake River. That's the eastern border of Oregon. Their white rumps make them easier to spot. They're called pronghorn sheep because of the horns that they grow on their heads. These tiny mammals are not shy. They're chipmunks living at Crater Lake National Park. The park rangers have had to discourage visitors from feeding them. While chipmunks will gladly charm people out of their treats, the human food is often a death sentence. Human food goes bad, especially in the winter, and replaces the food that the chipmunks need to survive the harsh winters here. Another interesting mammal at Crater Lake is the marmot. This one seems to be doing what most people do here, gazing at the incredible blue water at Crater Lake. Remember this mammal? It's a relative of the deer. This is an elk. This bull elk is the alpha of this herd. He alone will mate with the females. That's not to say that he's the only bull. Take a look at this bull elk. It appears that he sees or hears something at the tree line. Watch the urine fly as he makes threatening gestures with his antlers. He is agitated. Now he makes less dramatic use of his antlers, scratching an itch on his back. I'm not sure if he's defending the herd or working off his frustration at not being able to mate. The other bulls seem much calmer. Now you can tell they're bulls by the antlers. Only the males grow them. While any of these could be rivals to the alpha or each other, they get along with each other peacefully now. So do the elk cows, easy to identify since they don't grow antlers. This mammal is easy to identify. The black mask of the raccoon is the main giveaway. These intelligent animals are highly adaptable. They thrive where people live. Raccoons have greater control of their forepaws than most other mammals. They're able to pick up and manipulate objects with great dexterity. They're also able to eat a wide variety of food sources. Almost any habitat will do, from isolated swamps to large cities. They're found in almost every biome. Raccoons are mostly nocturnal, active at night, but they're seen sometimes during the daylight hours. River otters are mammals. They're active during the day. Monkeys are mammals as well. Monkeys share a lot of traits that humans have. These monkeys live in Mexico. They need a habitat that dense forests provide. This mammal also lives in Mexico. It's a coati. Ranging from Mexico into South America, this big cat is a jaguar. Jaguars are carnivores. They eat meat. Jaguars are the top predators in their habitat. These long pointed teeth, along with muscular jaws, allow jaguars to be successful hunters. Their spotted coats allow them to ambush unwary prey. While jaguars live better away from people, squirrels adapt well to environments with humans. This is another mammal you may have seen. Squirrels are found in many parts of North America. These gray squirrels were seen at Upper Table Rock near Medford, Oregon. Squirrels gather seeds and nuts to supply food during the winter. These are just a few of the mammals that grace our world.
You're watching Ramping Up Your English on RVTV Voices. This is segment 2 of episode 53. Our current unit is animals, and we're exploring classification so you can determine the classification of the animal on which you're writing your report. Now, what I want to do is show you a book at this time. If you think that you've chosen a subject that is a mammal that lives in North America, you might find it in this great book entitled Wild Animals of North America. The National Geographic Society is the publisher. Now, despite the general name of the title, all the animals featured here are mammals. So the book could be a source for some of the information you would find for your report. It's organized by order and family, along with interesting facts. This book has examples of National Geographic's award-winning photography. A lot can be learned by mammals, about mammals, by taking a close look at their bones. A future RVTV Voices program, Southern Oregon Classic Kids Network, or actually show, features yours truly as host. And this segment has me exploring some bones I found in the forest. Let's watch this clip about bones. Our letter of the day today is B, and that's the first letter of the word bones. I had some pretty exciting things to show you today about bones. I was hiking on a trail in a national forest, and I came across some interesting bones that were right near the trail. And this is the first one I saw, and it was nice and clean like this when I found it. And my first thought was, well, this is the face of an animal. You see how you look at you can look like there's, your eyes look through here? But closer look, it's like, well, then what are these things about, these indentions here? Well, this is not the only bone I found. So I started to look at my hypothesis and say, well, maybe this is something else. Now here's another bone that was found near here. And this is a pretty easy bone to identify. This is a femur. Think of this as your thigh bone, that bone that goes above your knee. It's very stout bone, as you can see. And I'm looking at these joints, and I look at this joint, and there's these grooves in here, and that tells me a lot. I believe that this is where the knee was of this animal. And you see this groove right here, because I've had knee trouble myself and had some x-rays done, I think this is that groove where the patella, or the kneecap, goes back and forth. Now, the question was, what animal could this have been? So looking at these two, I thought, well, too big to be a deer. But there is an animal in the deer family that's very large called an elk. And I came to believe that these are the remains of an elk that somehow died during the winter, and our decomposers, maybe turkey vultures, maybe ravens, maybe little insects as well, had cleaned all these bones off. And I did find a third bone with it, which I believe is a tibia, which would be the bone that goes below the knee. So I have to tell you, I'm not an expert on this, but you don't have to be an expert to think in terms of science. You observe. I've observed a number of things. I've kind of measured informally of how big these are. And so the idea is, well, what do I think it is? And if I'm not sure, what ways could I find out? I could be all wrong, but I've made some important steps in my investigation about this. And I have my hypothesis of what it is. And I could take some further steps to either see if my hypothesis is true or not, if these are indeed the bones of an elk. We do have elk in the area, so it's certainly not impossible for that to happen. Now, I was doing some other hiking on another trail one time, and I found this little bone right here. And I thought, well, see how curved this is? Well, if you put it like this, you see that this could very well be a rib bone. But this would not be from an animal that has another bone this big. This was in a different place. So I figured this actually is the bone of a deer. And so it's a rib bone from a deer is my hypothesis for it. In yet another location, I found this, and I don't have any question about what this is. It's very obvious. This is part of the leg of a deer, and you can see the hoof right here, the hard hoof, and it was cut off right here, probably by a hunter. You see these kind of things in the woods once in a while. This still has the hair of the deer, so there's even more evidence here that shows what that is. So remember, our letter today is B, and B is the first letter of the word bones. There's no guarantee you'll ever find anything like this out when you're hiking, but who knows? You might find some very interesting bones if you go out and hike on the trail, and at the very least, you're going to have a great time being outside and learning about nature. I've been looking at some of the smaller bones I've been collecting for use in the classroom. So, do you recognize which bone this is? Do you know the English word for it? Part of ramping up your English is learning more specific vocabulary. As a learner at the intermediate level, you probably know the word bone. But what about the common but specific name for this one? Can you see the little teeth? This is a jawbone. And you can learn a lot by looking at the jawbone and teeth of a mammal or any animal, especially the likely diet of the animal. And we'll learn more about diet in a future episode. And we'll learn much more about mammals when we return.
Organization that's doing big-time restoration of forests and stream banks.
Hello, I'm John Letts, producer of Adventures in Education. We've featured animals that live in North America on many of our episodes of Ramping Up Your English, but soon we'll feature South American animals and African animals. Now, here's how to find additional classification information. At the top of this wildlife card, you see the information for order, family, genus, and species. Now, this information may be required if you're writing a report in an academic setting. So whatever your class of animal is, reporting it is quick and easy. Simply write your name of the animal, not your name, but the animal name, and follow it with is a or, and then add the class. So if you want to report the other classification information, just use the form it's in the blank of blank. For example, a puma is a mammal. It's in the order of Carnivora, and the family Felidae, and the genus and species are Felix con color. That's it. You're done with classification. You've done it. So you can visit Wikipedia or an encyclopedia to find the classification of your chosen animal. And your local library has a book about the subject, I'm almost sure. It's very likely that it'll have its classification, at least the class. So in our next episode, we'll explore a mammal that has a long, close, and yet tragic relationship with people. You can watch and even download all episodes of Ramping Up Your English. Visit my website at letscreate.org to review this episode and go to the episode, it's the episode 53 page. You can watch and even download all episodes of Ramping Up Your English at archive.org/details/roguetv. Use the search box by entering Ramping Up Your English. You'll find all the episodes there. Ramping Up Your English can be seen in Ashland on Channel 15 on the Ashland Home Network and in the rest of Southern Oregon on cable channel 182. Showtimes are 8 o'clock a.m. on Mondays and 7:30 p.m. on Thursdays. Showtimes will vary in other areas. Check your local public access and education stations. I want to thank my director, Denise Ross, and my talented and loyal crew, and I want to thank you, our viewers. All of you have helped make this program an award winner. Join us next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roguetv. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.